Halloween, everyone! You may notice that my setup is a little bit different than normal, and that's because I actually moved from the United States to the UK to pursue my master's degree in primatology, which actually plays quite nicely into today's subject, which is a spooky, scary Halloween mashup between primates and cryptids. Meaning, that's right, we're covering everyone's favorite drunk party subject: how possible are primate cryptids?
For the uninitiated, a cryptid is an animal that has anecdotal support but is not recognized by the scientific community as existing. Examples include Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, and post-2003 Avril Lavigne.
Fortunately, there is an entire catalog of primate cryptids from which we can choose from. And since I am now pursuing my master's degree in primatology and am thus an expert, we can take a peek at the evidence for ourselves and see just how likely some of these creatures are.
Excluded are Bigfoot/Sasquatch, the Yeti, and the Yowie, since each of these deserves its own video. So, number 1, the Owlmas.
Olmos is Mongolian for wild man, and this cryptid is supposedly found in the Caucasus Mountains of Mongolia, or perhaps the Pamir and Altai regions of Central Asia and Mongolia respectively.
The Owlmas are typically described as human-like bipedal animals, between 5 and 6.5 feet tall. Their bodies are described as covered with reddish-brown hair with anthropomorphic features, including a pronounced brow ridge on the face, a flat nose, and a weak chin.
As such, many cryptozoologists have suggested that we may be dealing with an extant population of Homo neanderthalensis, or perhaps some sort of subspecies. So here's my thing with cryptozoologists. It's not a real field. I loved cryptids as a child, but the fact remains that you can't get a degree in cryptozoology. You're just as much a cryptozoologist as I am. I'm all for exploring the world and different potential possibilities for creatures here and there that may yet be discovered, and perhaps someday a cryptid might be validated. Probably won't, but it might be. But problems show up when you use that title as if it gives you some kind of authority, and those problems are called fraud.
Lauren Coleman thinks the whole field of cryptozoology deserves more respect.
A lot of people would like to put it in some kind of category of pseudoscience, and we really reject that.
It's fun. Whether or not it's science, it's hard to say.
But let's get back to the Owlmas. What evidence do we have? Generally, with these cryptids, we're going to categorize the evidence into a couple of different categories: eyewitness accounts, trace evidence such as footprints or hair, and photographs/videos. Sightings of the Owlmas are recorded in writing and go back about as far as the 15th century. In 1420, Hans Schiltberger recorded his personal observation of these creatures in the journal of his trip to Mongolia when he was a prisoner of the Mongol Khan, but described these animals as more hairy, savage humans rather than simple apes. He's quoted as saying, "On the same mountain there are savages who are not like the other people, and they live there. They are covered all over the body with the hair except for the hands and face, and run about like the wild beasts in the mountain, and also eat leaves and grass and anything they can find. The lord of the country sent to a DG, a man and woman from among these savages, that had been taken up into the mountain." Schiltberger also recorded one of the first European sightings of the Przewalski horses, real animals that live in the area. He noted that the Owlmas are also a part of the Mongolian and Tibetan apothecaries' Materia Medica, along with thousands of other animals and plants that live there now. British anthropologist Mira Shackley also describes Ivan Ivlov's 1963 observation of a family group of Owlmas. Ivlov, a pediatrician, decided to interview some of the Mongolian children who were his patients, and discovered that many of them also said they had seen Owlmas, and that neither the Mongol children nor the Owlmas they had seen were afraid of one another. Ivlov's driver also claimed to have seen them.
So this is actually really fascinating, because we have both locals and foreigners testifying to this mysterious species' potential existence. Some even going so far as to claim semi-frequent interactions. And Schultzberger isn't exactly a bad source. I mean, he's the one who first testified for the Przewalski's horse's existence. And that's a legitimate animal.
And that Tibetan apothecary book? That's legitimate as well, and indeed lists the Owlmas among other well-documented animals and plants. So could it be that we really are dealing with an extant population of Neanderthals? Well, as for viability, earlier members of genus Homo were remarkably versatile, particularly our cousin Homo neanderthalensis, which thrived in the chill of northern Europe for millennia before being ousted by our own species. The biggest constraint for a population of living Neanderthals would be their ability to have gone unnoticed for so long, which is unlikely. But as for surviving in the actual ecosystem, Neanderthals could absolutely have thrived in Mongolia, assuming there was enough prey to sustain them and enough genetic variability in their presumably small population.
So this is really strange, right? Is it possible that the cryptozoologists were right and we really are dealing with some kind of extant hominid? No, the cryptozoologist's track record remains abysmal. But fortunately for us, the truth of the matter is actually far more interesting. In 1850, a member of the Owlmas was actually captured, a female woman named Zana. At first, she was incredibly wild, attacking her captors non-stop, but eventually she grew accustomed to life in her new tribe. She assisted with local life around the village, and eventually she married and had sexual relations with a man of the village named Eji Janaba.
With no contraception, you can bet these relations ended in children. 4 surviving kids, to be exact.
The story goes that Janaba, not really being the family man type, gave these 4 children away to other members of the village, 2 to one family and 2 to another.
Zana is reported to have died in 1890, and her surviving children are reported to have grown up and had families of their own, with several descendants that have survived to this day. This was an excellent testable opportunity for anthropologists to see precisely what was going on with the supposed Owlmas under the lens of modern genetics. One of Zana's son's skulls was examined by 2 anthropologists in 1990, Grover Krantz being one of them. Krantz is an absolutely legitimate anthropologist, but he is hailed as one of the only professionals who spent time investigating the possibility of Bigfoot and coming to the conclusion that Bigfoot may very well be legitimate. Krantz pronounced the skull as entirely modern, with no Neanderthal features whatsoever, but another account by Russian anthropologist M.A. Kolodiva tells a different story. He described the skull as significantly different from the normal males of Abkhazia, remarking that it most closely approaches the Neolithic bones of the fossil series.
Basically, what we are today, anatomically modern Homo sapiens, is not the entire story of our species. There are fossil members considered a part of Homo sapiens that have more archaic traits. Perhaps it's a more pronounced brow ridge, it might be slight prognathism. They're still humans, but they are considered archaic Homo sapiens.
Enter Brian Sykes, cryptid hunter. Sykes is a geneticist with degrees from Oxford who frequently uses his work to investigate human prehistory. He's contributed a lot to the mitochondrial Eve hypothesis. He's also known for testing proposed Yeti DNA and finding out that of the 30 samples collected, 28 were found to be from living mammals local to the area, and 2 most closely resembled the genome of a Paleolithic polar bear. Sykes showed that Zana's DNA was 100% sub-Saharan African in origin, and he suggested that she could have been a slave brought to Abkhazia by the Ottoman Empire. This is a strange proposal regardless, as all known humans from the Ottoman time period, regardless of geographic home, would have been anatomically modern. But in 2015, Sykes reported that he had undertaken DNA tests on saliva samples of 6 of Zana's living relatives and a tooth of her deceased son, and he concluded that Zana was 100% African, but not of any known group. refuting the theory that she was a runaway Ottoman slave. Rather, he proposes that her ancestors left Africa approximately 100,000 years ago and lived in the remote Caucasus Mountains for many generations. Essentially, groups of archaic humans were leaving Africa in bursts from 200 to 300,000 years ago and spread out among the continent. This particular group was late to the party and perhaps ended up isolated in the Caucasus Range. Because of this, the selective pressure that may have eliminated archaic traits may have been absent, resulting in the Owlmas people's hairier forms.
Left to themselves, this group potentially retained some tribe traditions and, more importantly, genetics, flourishing in their isolated mountain stronghold. And to the eyes of the outsiders, as is par for the course in human history, these traditions and these genetics were seen as scary, wild, and foreign, leading to the categorization of this people group as feral. So what are we left with? Well, the most likely conclusion appears to be that which is supported by Sykes. It appears that a group of humans, perhaps which had retained a few archaic traits, left Africa around 100,000 years ago and made their way to an isolated patch in the Mongolian mountains. And Kolodiva was arguing that this skull was a member of archaic Homo sapiens, a holdover from a more ancient time. So while we may not have gotten an extant Neanderthal group, a hidden people tribe lost in the mountains of Mongolia is still pretty neat.
Conclusion? Not a cryptid. Number 2. The skunk ape. Much less in the vein of potentially possible, the skunk ape is a proposed cryptid living in the Everglades of Florida. Proposed at 450 pounds and 6 foot 6 inches tall and reeking of rotting flesh or rotten eggs, the skunk ape has a myriad of eyewitness encounters and even some photographs/footage supporting its existence. One family supposedly spotted the skunk ape in the year 2000, the day prior to Christmas, finding the creature tearing up their back porch and assuming it was some kind of odd dark-furred escape orangutan from the local zoo. Fortunately, they snapped a photo of the creature and ended up sending it to the local sheriff's office. There are also 2 primary videos floating around concerning the skunk ape, namely the Shearly footage and the "Help, I think I saw a skunk ape" footage. There are also many casts of alleged footprints of the skunk ape, also found and cataloged by David Shearly.
So what are we dealing with here? First, let's deal with the smoking gun of this cryptid. Those footprints.
They have 4 digits. Of the beyond numerous species of living primates, there is not a single example of a species having 4 digits. There are unique digit ratios, such as that of the eye, but all primates descend from the same Plesiadapiform with its 5-digit formula. In fact, none of our fossil primates have less than 5 digits on their hands and feet. It's actually difficult to find mammals in general that violate this pattern, or even tetrapods in general that do.
The idea of a branched species of ape or hominid group managing to survive long enough to evolve a completely unique digit formula while leaving 0 trace of itself in the fossil record is frankly absurd. Furthermore, there's no pressure that I could think of that would result in 4 digits rather than 5 for an animal that's living in a swamp or marshland. Consider the primates of the Bornean peat bogs.
Orangutans still have 5 digits, and as do the agile gibbons. You might be thinking, yeah, but those are arboreal primates. Swamp ape is terrestrial. And then I propose the crab-eating macaques and the proboscis monkeys, who also inhabit the peat swamp and manage just fine with 5 digits. Let us now examine the photograph. Certainly, we seem to be looking at a large animal. Is it an escaped orangutan as suggested by the photograph's takers? Is it a black bear? Or perhaps a costumed Homo sapiens? It isn't a skunk ape. You'll notice the sloped quadrupedal posture typical of knuckle-walking primates, bears, and humans pretending to be skunk apes. It appears to have flanges like those found in orangutans, as well as a hideous underbite like those found in the bad costume designs of great apes. The teeth on the underbite are far too small to be those of a flanged orangutan male, and the flanges eliminate the possibility of a female.
Based alone on this photograph, as well as the testimony of the taker, in my personal opinion, this is a photograph of a costumed human adult.
The same goes for the Shirley footage, which looks very much like a person in a costume running through the Everglades, perhaps drunk or on some sort of drug. My reason for proposing this is thus: bipedal locomotion is a great way of clocking a hominid species. The locomotion style in this video is very efficient, meaning it would have to be a member of at least genus Homo, rather than an Australopithecine, given the latter lacked the appropriate proportions and valgus knee to present in this fashion. But by genus Homo, our lineage had lost any semblance of the enormous sagittal crests seen in the video, such as those seen in some Australopiths, Paranthropines, or living gorillas. Given there is no fossil support for an extant Paranthropine lineage, that is to say, we find no fossils dating within the past million years, it is incredibly unlikely to propose that this is some undiscovered hominid. And we know it's not a gorilla. They can't run like that.
All this barring the fact that there is exactly zero support for any endemic primates in North America except for humans. And even we aren't truly endemic, are we?
Lastly, we examined the "I think I saw a skunk ape, help me" footage. In my opinion, this could just as easily be a black bear, which are known to inhabit the Everglades. Nothing in this footage necessitates a primate, and many ursids are known to stand on their hind legs. There's also the possibility that this is also a human in a costume.
Now, could Florida support a non-human primate species? Yeah, it's doing it right now.
There are over 300 wild rhesus macaques living in Silver Spring State Park, Florida, thanks to an accidental introduction in the 30s by a Florida man.
This is very telling, as similar to macaques, really all anthropoid primates, hominids and the great apes are relentlessly curious. Even the most solitary great ape, the orangutan, interacts with human society frequently out of curiosity and, unfortunately, necessity. Pragmatically speaking, it is incredibly difficult to propose an extant population of apes living in the Everglades of Florida, morphologically, geographically, and using your plain old common sense. The conclusion? Skunk ape is incredibly unlikely. Proposed sightings can likely just be attributed to people's escaped primate pets, misconstrued black bears, or adult humans in costume.
Number 3. The EBU Gogo. The EBU Gogo is a cryptid that appears in Flores, Indonesia. They reportedly have wide and flat noses, broad faces with large mouths, and hairy bodies. The females are also reported to have long, pendulous breasts. They also reportedly murmur to one another in their own language, and can reportedly repeat what is said to them back in a parrot-like fashion. In the Nage language of Central Flores, Ebu means grandmother and Gogo means one who eats anything. Ecologically, we know that Indonesia supports all kinds of primates, from gibbons to macaques to leaf monkeys to apes, and the appearance of the EBU Gogo sounds feasible for a hominid. In fact, a 3-foot-tall hominid known as Homo floresiensis lived on the island of Flores perhaps as recently as 13,000 years ago, which has inspired more literal interpretations of the EBU Gogo stories. Anthropologist Gregory Forth, professor of anthropology at the University of Alberta, Canada, has stated that, quote, wild man, unquote, myths are prevalent in Southeast Asia, and has investigated their linguistic and ritualistic roots, speculating that Homo floresiensis may be evidence that the folk tales of the EBU Gogo and similar creatures, such as the orang pendek on Sumatra, may be cultural memories rooted in fact.
As such, we can classify the EBU Gogo as one of two situations. Either one, we're dealing with cultural myth based upon local primate species, or two, we're dealing with a potential sighting of a true member of Homo floresiensis passed down by tribe members through numerous generations and retained within the cultural memory.
Number 4. The Bukit Timah Monkey Man. The BTM is a cryptid said to inhabit Singapore, chiefly in the forested Bukit Timah region. This creature is occasionally cited as a forest-dwelling hominid, but usually a monkey, and is accounted for as being immortal, the latter being a more folklorish-related aspect.
Alleged sightings of the animal are rare, and most of them come from Malayan folktales, a few from Japanese soldiers fighting during World War II, and some more still from local residents. The first was in 1805, with the most recent being in 2007. This cryptid is said to have a monkey-like face, but is almost entirely bipedal. Its It's 3 to 6 feet tall and mostly gray. Luckily for us, some interviews were collected by a Singapore tabloid in 2007. The following interviews are here. A 48-year-old taxi driver who lives around the neighborhood of Serangoon was quoted as saying, "When I was driving my taxi past the fire station in the upper Bukit Timah road in the middle of the night, I hit what I thought was a child that ran out into the middle of the road. It was on the car bonnet then that it snarled at me. It was like a monkey, but so big. It ran off injured and covered in blood, holding its arm, which appeared to be broken." A 29-year-old housewife said, "I was going to the bus stop early one morning to catch the bus 171. It was very foggy and cold. I thought I saw a tramp going through the rubbish bin. However, when I approached, it called out with a loud animal sound and ran back into the forest. It was gray, hairy, and ran on 2 legs, but had a monkey's face. I was shivering with fear and called the police, but to no avail." And a 65-year-old retiree from the neighborhood of Bukit Panjang recalled the creature from his childhood, saying, "We were always told as children that when in Kampung not to go near the forest at night due to the monkey man. Of course, we never saw it ourselves, but it was always something an uncle or friend or family member had seen. Once we were shown those footprints on the forest road, I remember the strong urine smell. Whenever we heard the shrieks coming from the jungle, we would tell each other, 'Do not disturb the monkey man.'" So the authorities are fairly certain, and I tend to agree with them here, that what people are actually seeing are local members of the crab-eating macaque population, since crab-eating macaques can get pretty big, and the only difference between the description of the monkey man and your typical run-of-the-mill crab-eating macaque is the size. And others still have suggested that similar to UFO sightings, these monkey man sightings are coinciding with periods of civil unrest, so mass hysteria is essentially sizing up what people are seeing as your typical run-of-the-mill macaque.
Conclusion: not a cryptid. Number 5. The Honey Island Swamp Monster, also known as Skunk Ape 2 Electric Boogaloo. Found in good old Louisiana, the Honey Island Swamp Monster has a fascinating description. Standing at over 7.5 feet tall and weighing between 400 and 500 pounds, the Honey Island Swamp Monster, also known as the Louisiana Wookiee, is said to be covered in a thick coat of matted gray or brown hair and swamp weeds. Its yellow eyes are seemingly reptilian, and the smell it emits has been called a stench of death. This primitive creature has long been blamed for the deaths of livestock and the mysterious disappearances of children in the adjacent areas. Popular lore in the region is that the Honey Island Swamp Monster might be the horrifying product of a union between a chimpanzee and an alligator. This is due to its overall Bigfoot-style form, combined with its webbed, clawed, 3-fingered hands?
So, that concludes our tour of some of the less-known primate cryptids. We ended up with 3 being something kind of legitimate and 2 being probable hoaxes. That's a pretty okay score. Remember, if it exists, science can probably explain it. And if it can't, it will someday. So, if you like this kind of content, let me know. If you'd like to see something different, let me know then too. I'm scripting a video based off of cat domestication, covering the ins and outs of that, but I want my cat to be involved, so I'm waiting until December when I'll be back in the United States, so expect that then, and other stuff here and there in the meantime. Thanks so much for supporting me in my videos. I really can't express enough how much I value all of the feedback that you guys give. It lets me keep feeling encouraged to talk science, so until next time.